And it is Thursday, 6 a.m. Welcome to Coffee and Coaches Conference Call. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. Okay. Jim Ferris is on the call, driving to his client, I'm assuming. And
workout first.
Oh, okay. Are you swimming?
No, I put my rowing machine in the back seat. You know, you have those like pop-up like dance things. I just pull my rower out somewhere and start rowing.
Sweet.
Bill, you saw Terry yesterday?
I did.
How's he doing?
He kicked some booty.
Did he?
Yeah.
As always?
So he walked in. If anybody doesn't know, like, go on Instagram and you'll see like pictures of the Terry Project. And it's a little background. So Terry's a guy that I've known for, well, since I passed open, which was almost 12 years ago. And Terry's got like, hip replacements and knee replacements but he's a golf instructor and a tango dancer. And so he purchased a program that everybody knows about, that is designed to improve your posture, and other things. Like, they promise many things in regards to the outcome of their program. So he purchased this program, and Terry is the guy that works diligently. Like, if you ever ask him to do something, he will do it tenfold. And so he committed himself to this program and was incredibly successful to such a degree that it did the exact opposite of what he wanted it to do. Right? So he comes in with this hunchback kind of posture and massive kind of forward headish kind of a thing, and just a whole bunch of muscle activity that he didn't want. And Campo was a student at the time. And so he got the first look. So he saw him from the get-go, and saw the changes, like this evolution. Like, literally, it looks like evolution if you put all the pictures together, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so Terry's been on his own for about a month. Apologize for the dog thing. He's very excited. And so we always measure him as we would a regular patient. And so he was missing maybe 5-10 degrees of internal rotation yesterday, and that's it. Like, he came in almost clean as it was. Yeah, it was pretty good.
That's awesome.
He came in pretty clean, and then I tweaked. Like, I turned his statics into dynamics, and then you saw the after picture. Like, that was literally him moving through space rather than doing anything static.
That's so great.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let him go for a couple months, and then we'll just follow up. But it's worth the look just to see the changes in the pictures. If you go through my Instagram account, there's a whole bunch of them spread out, and you can kind of see the evolution, like literally the changes. So when people talk about posture and things like that, I don't look at it from a static perspective, although in this representation they are static photos. But it's been pretty cool to see, and it is. We did the exact opposite, would be what you would perceive based on what Terry was doing, and much more successful in outcome.
What were some of the final activities that you were doing with him?
So Terry was doing a lot of PNF diagonals and things like that, and literally I just turned him into dynamic activity. So he's now D2s. He's doing a bilateral.
So he's doing disco.
D1, D2 extensions and stuff like that. So, like I said, just took everything that we've done statically, positionally, and then superimposed the breathing on top of that. So exhale on exertions, inhale on recoveries, and again, it's not about anything special per se. It's just doing the right thing at the right time, versus making these blind assumptions that everybody's going to have the same needs. And like I said, Terry being so compliant, he's like the dream client that anything you ask him to do, he'll do.
Continuing on from the question last week about dorsal rostral breathing, you said you were comparing it to a dented car fender and just, like
Correct.
reaching from the inside and poking it out using air.
Yes, sir.
So is that just literally how it sounds, where you kind of get a little protraction, thoracic flexion, and then just start breathing?
So generally speaking, yes. I'm not a huge, one second, I gotta do something really important here. Have a good day. I did had to kiss the door just one. Generally speaking, you have the right idea. Okay. Now, we don't want to think about this as just a pure protraction, which would not be representative of a position of the scapula for breathing purposes, right? So the scap moves through this four-dimensional movement as you move airflow, right? So depending on what position you're in, right, with your extremity, it's going to determine what strategy you're going to be using in the dorsal rostral area to create expansion. So if we want the dorsal rostral to expand, I can put the scapula into a position of inhalation, or I could put it in a position of exhalation and yielding. So the two strategies are not the same, but they both create expansion under different circumstances. So we have to consider the desired outcome, right? So randomly wanting dorsal rostral expansion is all fine and wonderful, but we typically want to have a purpose to it, right? So if there is an extremity motion that we're trying to recapture, that expansion becomes very, very important, right? So anytime that we have an external rotation limitation, we'll just use the shoulder since we're talking about dorsal rostral. Anytime we have an external rotation limitation, the dorsal rostral area tends to be compressed, right? So it's the dented fender, if you will. And that limits external rotation, because what it does is it changes the orientation of the scapula relative to the humerus, which changes the concentric to eccentric orientation of the musculature around the shoulder, and then it creates that external rotation limitation, okay? And so again, depending on what the desired outcome is going to be, we determine, by extremity position, what type of an expansion that we're going to get, whether we actually move muscles into an orientation where they're eccentrically oriented, whether they're at length, or whether they're concentrically oriented, creating a compressive strategy, right? Or we want that to yield and allow that to expand while those muscles are still concentrically oriented. And so again, we have to make a decision as to what the intent is, okay?
All right, got it. Thanks,
Because
Bill.
each of those are purposeful, right? It just depends on what the needs are.
Got it. Thanks, Bill.
Because when we go to different positions, we have different outcomes.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. And the other question, actually, I was trying to help a buddy of mine. He lives across the country in Atlanta. Oh, actually, he's in Chicago right now. But we were in just a Zoom call, and he was talking about how he has pain with like in his neck, shoulder area after prolonged sitting. And so this was just due to his job. He's sitting a lot and kind of like reaching forward and like taking notes a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering if you could help me through my thought process here. I realized if he were to come in, I would, do a range of motion assessment, which I was able to do, but then he gets pain after like prolonged sitting or in that same posture. So it wasn't something I could replicate at the time. And so some of the objective measures that I thought I kind of needed, like I would have done MMT or something.
What?
I would have done like tested his muscle strength.
What? Why?
Well, I mean, so I would have figured that it's more of an endurance issue because
Endurance
it's
issue?
right, because or if he's just in that same static position for a long time,
Okay.
so kind of getting stuck, or his muscles are fatiguing after too long. So that's just kind of the thought process I was going through, and I didn't know what.
What muscles would you want to check that would be useful to have an understanding of?
I mean, just from like the my limited understanding, it's just the stuff we learn from school, and it would be like mid trap strength or like deep neck flexor, you know. But that's why I kind of wanted to pick your brain on this a little bit, because I realized that objectively I didn't have a solid um, baseline of what I wanted to check, you know, because I couldn't replicate the symptoms.
Okay. So here's the best that you can do. Okay. Is you want to have all movement options available to you. So if he is static, right, and then becomes uncomfortable. Have you ever sat on a hard chair for a really long time?
Right, right. And actually, I just got to that part in your book.
Okay. So if you sit on the hard chair long enough, your butt starts to hurt, right? Yes?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Would you immediately make an assumption that because your butt's hurting and you're sitting on the hard chair that you have butt weakness?
Probably not.
Okay. So let's take that one off the table.
Okay.
Why does your butt hurt when you sit on a hard chair for a really long time?
Because you've been sitting on it for a long time and there's just pressure buildup.
Okay. Okay. And so what are the consequences of pressure buildup in one spot?
I mean, we will get sore in that area. Like,
Well, why? Why does that happen?
that's because you're
Go ahead.
nonstop putting pressure. It's like it's on a hard surface.
Okay. Have you ever worked with anybody that was wheelchair bound?
Oh yeah, I have.
Okay. What do they have to do several times an hour if they're wheelchair bound? They have to do certain things. Otherwise, they get a problem down there, right?
Right.
What's the problem that you're trying to prevent?
Pressure injuries, pressure ulcers.
Okay.
So you
Why
want to
do you
move
get
them
those? Why do you get those?
because they're not moving. They have pressure buildup on the same spot.
Okay, what does the pressure do?
Um,
Why is it bad?
I guess just nonstop pressure is bad
If I
because
put
it'll.
enough pressure on your throat,
Uh-huh.
what would happen?
Well, that would be you would block airways or airflow.
Right. You ever watch MMA?
Yeah,
You ever see a rear naked choke?
sure,
You ever see anybody pass out?
of course,
Why do they pass out?
because they're not able to breathe.
No, it's not the breath.
Lack of oxygen. Lack of oxygen.
They cut off the blood flow, right?
Right.
Okay. So why is the base of the neck and the upper shoulders any different from anything else?
So
Okay.
so it's just lack of
If
blood
it's
flow to that
static,
area.
if it's static and it's not moving, if there's muscle activity in that area, okay, what happens when you contract a muscle hard enough to the blood flow?
Sure, it constricts and probably.
Exactly. And what are the byproducts of that? It's like the whole consequence, right? So you get an increase in acidity, right? Your type 3 afferents that I think it's type 3 afferents that monitor that area, send signals to the brain, and the brain says, hey, there's like this weird chemistry thing going on here that I'm not really sure if it's interesting or not, but I tell you what I'm going to do. I need you to move a little bit so this chemistry thing, so the pH goes back to normal. We get normal blood flow and oxygenation. But what if you can't move? Like, what if you're stuck there because of work, right? And then you hold this position over time, right? You see what I'm getting at? Uh-oh, we froze up. That's unfortunate. I was on roll too, man. Anyway, static positions are no different than anything else, right? There are consequences that are associated with them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have a weakness problem, right? People make the assumption it's like, oh, you have pain in an area. Well, I need to pull on it with a stretch, and then I need to strengthen something. And that's been, I don't know where this started, but that's sort of been this methodology that people have used, you know, in rehab for the stretch and strengthen crowd. And again, looking at it from a different perspective, it's like, okay, do you have full movement capabilities in that area? That's really where we need to go first and foremost, because if you have all those movement options, I have all the muscle positions that I need, I have normal blood flow, so I don't get all the secondary consequences of static positions, pressures, and tensions, right? So a lot of pain that people are experiencing are merely associated with that. Doesn't mean they're damaged, doesn't mean they have tissue changes, doesn't mean that they're broken. It just means that they have too much pressure or tension in one place and they can't alleviate that, right? Which is one of the reasons why we do what we do, and why we have the model that we use. Because what that does is it just simply restores movement options. And a lot of good things happen when you do that. Like I said, when you have normal excursion of muscles, that means that I can reduce blood flow, I can increase blood flow, I can alleviate pressures and tensions that might be identified by the system as something that's salient or dangerous. Based on your description, you have about 4 different models floating through your head, right? So you mentioned like literally four different perspectives on what you're dealing with, right? And so what you're going to have to do is resolve some of that, because there are conflicts in those models, like in certain perspectives, right? So some of those are going to have like yanking and pulling exercises, and some of those are going to have like, oh, you need force production or strength, and then some of them are going to be associated with respiration and things like that. And so what you're going to have to do is resolve some of that, and you need like a little bit of a guide, right? You need sort of like a mentor, because there isn't a book that's going to solve your problems. Okay, you need somebody that's got some experience that they can offer you, versus trying to do some book learning, right? Because when we get into the complexity of how we move, there are some foundational principles that you might be able to pull from a text, that would be useful, okay? But the application of them is experiential, and to take advantage of this. So Mike Camperini, who is on this call, was my former student, okay? And so he understands that now. Like, he has been through this situation where, okay, I had all this book learning from school, and then you put him in, we put him in the purple room where he got really uncomfortable for a long time, right? And so he understands like the value of that experience of miserable failure, right? And for understanding about how this actually works. And so again, for you to come in and say, like, if you read something in a book, or you follow somebody's principle. So you mentioned Yanda stuff, so I'll pick on that. You mentioned Yanda. And so if you follow those principles, you might have a measure of success. But again, that model has limitations. And then you go to the next model and you say, oh, I can superimpose this on top of that. And then that model has limitations. And so, like I said, you need somebody that can get you past the isolated structure of a model, right? And start to see this thing as one big thing. And again, there's no book that'll do that for you. Sure, Joey.
Yeah, so I don't know if I think you're pretty active on Twitter too. I don't know if you saw the post about the deconditioned athletes that were coming back from quarantine, and just like, some of them are just so out of shape that they can't start anywhere near where they were before.
Anytime you've got a shorter time span to prepare somebody, again, you have to use a little bit more of an intensive method to acquire fitness quickly, right? But then you'd have to monitor your key performance indicators to make sure that you're not driving them too hard in one direction too quickly. So again, what we would recognize in our model is that we would see people losing ranges of motion. So you have to have some way to identify, it's like, okay, what is their fitness level? So you have to do some testing, right? And to determine, okay, where do we need to go? What is the greatest emphasis that we need to place on them? So the nice thing about professional athletes in general, though, that have been at that level for a while, is that they do have, they have constructed machinery, right, that lasts for a really long time. So they don't decline as much, right? But there might be like a priority in regards to, I don't know, force production or endurance that you can emphasize. And so again, if you're in a short-term situation, the majority of the work that you do will be towards that singular entity of their performance. I don't think that any one model has all the answers. right? So you take what you can it's kind of what we were talking about before. It's like you take whatever you can from any of the other models, right? But understand that every model is limited. Nobody has complete information, right? And so again, you need some way to integrate all of those things, because everybody tries to speak a little bit different language, even though we're all talking about the same thing. And so you'll have any number of perspectives, right? So I tend to gravitate away from a singular system, if you will, because of the limitations. Having done that, so the mistake that I made was doing something like that, right? And not allowing myself to see other things, or only seeing it through a singular lens. So the more models that you have, the more lenses that you have, allow you to see so many different things that are influences. And so I encourage you to take whatever you need to from any source, but look at it from a much larger perspective and saying, this is not the end all be all answer, no matter what you're studying, because all of them have a limit to what they can do. Socrates was way ahead of his time, right? Did anybody get that joke? Or just me? Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. So you're a big Keanu Reeves fan then?
Yeah, I mean, more so those movies for sure, but yeah.
When is the next Bill and Ted coming out? Do you know?
So a buddy of mine, actually, he's been trying to get into the movie industry for like the last decade. He's been in like some small roles in some movies, and he said that they just announced yesterday, I think, that they're going to release it, I think just streaming only.
Oh, really?
But he said that's a good thing because it'll come out earlier. So.
Well, so is it done?
Yeah, it was supposed to come out in theaters, I think, in August.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither.
like this is like the ultimate sequel. This is going to be like, the funny thing is like, you know, Keanu Reeves is like so rock and roll with John Wick, you know, like he's just killing it with the John Wick movies. Yeah. And now he's going to come back as Ted, and it's just going to like destroy people's perspective that don't remember the Bill and Ted stuff, you know?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
I cannot.
For people who don't, or like maybe younger or don't know that, it's going to be, they're going to think there's something wrong with them or something.
Exactly. They're going to say, why is he ruining his career? He's like, no, this is how he started.
Just kind of evolution of, well, I think I don't know if it's evolution of training. I think it's more or less kind of the meters kind of going back in the other direction. Like, I was on another call and we were talking about how, you know, training almost became almost like kind of rehabby, where, you know, people were trying to spend a lot of time doing breathing strategies and, you know, they were doing stretching for like 15, 20 minutes. But how have you guys at IFAST kind of evolved over time, I think, from a training standpoint, like from a coaching standpoint, where, you know, because you guys understand, we have a better understanding, better grasp of training and kind of like inhalation, exhalation strategies. Has training become more, hey, we're going to get these guys moving, getting them to kind of moving instead of lying them on the floor? Have you guys seen that with your coaching as well, from just more of a training standpoint? Hopefully that question's like, I'm kind of like trying to assemble all of it together, but does that make sense?
Yeah. So I always make the comparison between what we do and MMA. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, if you go way back to the first UFCs, right? So when Gracie won the 3 out of the first 4, and nobody knew how to defend Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? So all he had to do is get his hands on you, and he would eventually choke you out.
Yep.
Right. It's kind of the same thing, right? So it was like, so somebody obviously that got their butt handed to them by Gracie goes, you know, I'm a boxer, but show me how to get out of this position or how to avoid this position, right? And that's how the mixed martial arts things goes. So then you spend a whole bit, so then everybody latches onto that, right? So everybody goes, oh, I got to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to be in an MMA. And then the stand-up guys come back, and then you get the Thai boxers that come in, and now everybody's throwing elbows and knees. right? So it's just this evolution of stuff that gets superimposed and eventually becomes the mixed version, right? And so we're the same way. And so that you'll notice that there'll be like the hot topics, right? And then everybody goes there, and then it gets overemphasized, right? And then it comes back and they go, oh, I don't need to do that. It's important and useful. So now we're going back to this model perspective. It's like, okay, you got all these different models. I got to figure out how I'm going to integrate all that stuff, right? And so some of it is going to be through trial and error. Some of it's going to be experience, but some of it is just recognizing how this stuff, how all of our stuff together works. Like, what's the commonality? How are these things produced, right? How do we actually behave? And then where does this fit in, right? So rather than looking at, doing rehab-ish exercises, like there's a good reason to do those things, right? But if you don't understand it to any depth, then you don't know how it integrates into everything else. That's why I'm so much about having a framework to work from, right? So we just call it a model, right? Because that's all we have. We don't understand the complexity of everything, so we have to have a model. But it's like, is there another way? And so you keep, and again, same conversation I had a minute ago. It's like, what questions are you asking? Okay, so when you put somebody on the ground, why are you putting them on the ground? Do you have a reason? Or are you just doing it because that's what everybody else did? Right? And that's usually what happens. And that's, again, I think it's just part of, I think you're right. I think it's just part of the evolution, if you will, but again, if we ask more questions about how we do stuff in the first place, which is what I've done for the last 5 or 6 years, like rather than saying like, oh, I'm going to use this system and this system and this system, ask the questions like, how do you actually achieve certain things? Now I can say, this will fit into that category, this will fit into that category, and now I have my big bowl of stuff that is mixed up, rather than saying boom, 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 right? Which is what everybody, like I said, that's kind of what everybody does, is everybody gets excited because everybody wants to do the latest thing. It's any different than it was. But again, keep asking the right question. Like every time you do something, you better have a why reason for it, right? Every time you get an outcome, try to rationalize, why did that happen, or why did it not happen? What did I do wrong? Did I pick the wrong exercise? Did I give a bad cue, et cetera, et cetera? So again, it becomes very process oriented, right? But I think it's always the recognition that no matter what you do, you don't have the answer, you have an answer, and there's probably something better, which keeps it exciting, I think. Keeps me interested anyway. Like I'm more interested in what I do now than I've ever been. And I'm almost 30 years in as a PT. And then I actually started training people when I was an undergrad. So who would want to go to that guy? I don't know, because he was an idiot. But point being is, it's like you just have to accumulate this stuff and recognize that it's just a process.
Be excellent to each other.
Oh, nice call.